So, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. I am your host, Gandhi of the OG's Perspectives podcast. We trying to bring you, episodes of substance, right? Content that is going to be enriching to you, your mind, your soul, as they say. And today we have a very, very special guest. I know I say that a lot, but I really do believe it. You know what I'm saying? Today we're going to switch mode a little bit, right? We're going to get into more, a different, industry, right? So we have today with us Kori Anders. He is a mixing engineer based out of Atlanta in the United States of America. Myself, I've worked with him, through the years. And we're going to have a discussion with him and trying to, pick his brain and see if we could, again, give y'all some, content that'll be useful to y'all. So how you doing today, Kori?
Hey, what's going on, Gandhi? Happy to be here, bro.
I'm straight, man. So again, man, I really appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? I know you got a busy schedule and everything, but I really wanted to do this. I wanted to get, I've worked with you over the years. And as I said with the podcast, what I'm trying to do is, bring, information, to the audience that I think that they could garner something from, even if they're not interested, say, for example, the field that you're in, but I still would like to, whether it's something personal, whether it's the challenges you might have went through and how you overcame, I wanted to get something out of that. So I really appreciate it. So to begin, Kori, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself? Let us know your background, where you from. I assume you're in Atlanta right now, but where are you from, man?
Okay, I'll give you a brief background. So my name is Kori Anders, and I was born and raised in San Jose, California. So that's the Bay Area, the West Coast. So I grew up in Cali. As soon as I graduated from high school, I moved to Atlanta to go to college. I went to Morehouse College.
Okay.
I got a finance degree at Morehouse College. Like the whole time, I've always had a passion for music, and as a kid in San Jose, all I wanted to do was grow up and become a DJ. And so it wasn't until I was in my junior year at Morehouse College that I discovered the field of audio engineering. I was working towards a finance degree at Morehouse and got an internship at Dallas Austin, producer Dallas Austin's studio, and he had a label at the same time. So I got an internship on the label side, which was the business side. And one thing with the internship is I had to interact with people at the studio. So I would have to, I was the gopher, so I was going in between. And so when I would do some of these errands into the studio, I met some of the engineers. I met this one engineer by the name of Leslie Brathwaite. And then he was the one that introduced me to a whole world of, okay, you can be in the music industry, you can be on the technical and creative side and have a steady career without having to be a rapper or a musician or an artist or any of that, because you're still creative, but you're behind the scenes and you're working all the gear in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, I still graduated from Morehouse with the finance degree, was moved up to Chicago, was planning on going to law school, University of Chicago, because the whole plan was, okay, I'm gonna become a lawyer, make a ton of money, and build my own studio. So the end game was still to be in the studio.
Yeah.
And maybe midsummer, like that first summer after I graduated from Morehouse and I was working in corporate America, I was hating life. I was literally about to start law school in the fall, was just like, this isn't it. And so I decided to can that and ended up applying to Full Sail University down in Orlando, and literally packed up my stuff in a U-Haul, just drove down to Orlando and started school that fall for audio engineering. And that, fast forward to now, I graduated from Full Sail, moved back to Atlanta, got an internship at a studio, and it just worked my way up over time. And so here we are now.
Wow, that's a hell of a story, man. Because all this time I've been working with you, I know you a little bit, or I'm aware, or acquainted with you, but I didn't know, first of all, that you were from the West Coast, right? San Jose, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's crazy. I always thought you were from Atlanta. Although I'll tell you what, in our conversations, your accent, it never sounded like Atlanta to me. You know what I mean?
That's usually what gives it away. And the funny thing is, when I'm talking to people, a lot of people think I'm from New York. So apparently I have somewhat of a New York accent.
Yes.
But yeah, I was born and raised in California.
Yes, because usually people in the West Coast, they have a particular twang. People in the South have a twang.
Yeah.
New York, they don't. It's not, they have a distinct accent, but it's not, I guess, what we would call a twang. So that's probably why they keep saying
right.
New York. But wow, San Jose. Okay, yeah. I work with as you might realize anyway, since you've done a lot of mixes for me, I work with a lot of artists out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Particularly near San Jose, we have San Diego OG Mitchy Slick, for example. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Mitchy Slick, I work with
Yeah, I've
him
heard of
too.
him.
He's a close. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's cool, man. That's cool.
yeah.
Okay, and so interesting. So you have a background in finance and also law to a certain extent.
Well, see the whole like not really law because didn't pursue that degree. I was literally about to start law school, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's when I made the decision to let me just do follow my heart, follow my passion. And so I don't, as far as actually having a background in it, no more so than just an interest in it. I'm still intrigued by it, but not enough that I never had a passion for it. It was going to be a means to an end.
Oh, okay, so it was just something you were trying to do just to get to the
Yeah.
paper.
Right, 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 right,
Okay,
right.
so okay. With that being said, because I was going to ask you certain questions, there, so they're illegal questions, but okay, that's fine. But in terms of okay, so but you have a background in the finance, if you want to
Finance,
say
yes.
industry. Okay,
Yeah.
which is there a particular section, or is it
It was more.
broad?
It was more like so. My focus was more business finance, and it was more on the lines of like wealth management, dealing with like consulting for companies. Because when I was in working in corporate America in Chicago before I started law school, I was working for Fannie Mae, which is the mortgage stuff and all of that. So that whole aspect of finance
Okay,
per
that's
se,
yeah, that's okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, I gotta ask you some questions off, off camera sometimes. Get my wealth up, man. All right, so we've heard. Okay, I've heard. I guess the story. You ended up going to Full Sail, and you also
Mhm.
mentioned that you got. I guess I don't know if it's your break through Leslie, right? Leslie Bradford,
Right, right.
world renowned engineer, also.
Mhm.
So what was he? When you went to Full Sail, because I understand, I don't know, was he already at Full Sail teaching, or did you meet him
Nah,
outside
so
of Full Sail?
here's yeah, so I met him outside because I met him prior to going to Full Sail, and I met him like while I was during my internship with Dallas Austin Studio because he was Dallas Austin's main engineer and mixer, and I before I even met him and got into that world, I didn't know anything about audio engineering or any of that, and
Mhm.
so just interfacing with him and is like he was super cool, like super approachable, and he was just like I mean, I would just remember walking into the studio and just looking at it, felt like a spaceship with all of the gear and all of the console. And I just remember asking him, I was like, well, what does all this do? And he would just show me different things. And I would just be like, this is really intriguing. And that's when he told me about the whole background of engineering and how he's interfacing with artists and producers and creatives. And he's the one that's capturing and sculpting the actual sound. And I was just like, this is really, really intriguing. And so he was instrumental in opening up my mind to that world. But I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my god sister who actually introduced me to Dallas Austin and that whole camp too, because she was the one that actually got me in the door. Her name is Inga Willis, and
Okay,
so that's who actually opened up the world for me and got me in the door, and just opened the door for me.
okay. So to I guess close that question, so you did not.
Yeah.
He wasn't your teacher at
No, no,
Full
nah.
Sail.
So yeah, nah,
He was
but
just
I
a
will.
mentor.
Right. But I will say, while I was at Full Sail, I was that student that was constantly, I won't say bugging him. I was just very, very persistent. So like the way Full Sail runs, my course at the time, they offer master's degrees now, but at the time I went, they only offered associate's degree. And associate's degrees are usually 2-year degrees. They would cram that 2-year curriculum into 12 solid months. And so what it was like every month we had a new class, and on average I think we were going to class like 40 hours a week, and it was split 20 hours in the classroom, 20 hours in the studio. And during my whole time at Full Sail, every month I don't say every other week I was calling Leslie, hey Les, I'm at this month in at Full Sail, just staying in his ear, just on some like, what should I be looking for, just trying to he was like a mentor to me. But at the same token, he was, at the time that I was at Full Sail, he was knee deep in a lot of the Cash Money early stuff that he was like mixing like 5-6 records a day for Cash Money. I mean, this was like in that prime time, so he was super busy. So 9 times out of 10 he wasn't answering my calls. And so the one time he'd answer the call, he would just be like, man, don't think I'm ducking you, I'm just super busy, I appreciate you, just keep on, just keeping on. So when I graduated Full Sail, and moved back up to Atlanta, he wasn't working with Dallas Austin anymore. He had moved to another studio called Patchwork in Atlanta. And so for a lot of people in the industry, they know Patchwork as being a staple and all this. And so he was instrumental in helping me get an internship at Patchwork. And that kind of is where I really started my career as far as, being in the studio and just working as an intern, going on food runs, taking out trash, cleaning up, all for free. Like they weren't paying me anything. They only just reimbursed me for gas mileage. And, just worked my way up to where I became his assistant, Leslie's assistant, for a number of years. Yep. And that was probably the most priceless part of my journey, just because, I got to learn hands-on with somebody that is an incredible mixer. And so you can't help, it's almost like the proximity effect. You can't help but, learn and absorb a lot of the great things that come from great people when you surround yourself with them. So that was the whole journey, and then just slowly just worked my way up.
That's what's up. So for the audience, and even maybe for yourself also, the reason, so it's the interview is with Kori. However, that what we're getting is a background of the Kori Anders that, if you're not familiar with him, after this episode, you will be. So for you to get to see how did this Kori didn't just pop out of nowhere, right? You weren't in a bubble. Like, so there's a world behind Kori. And from what I'm getting, at least Kori, the engineer, the mixing engineer, Leslie Bradford, the reason we're talking about him is not about him, right? But we're talking about him because it seems that he was very instrumental into, helping the becoming of this Kori that we are familiar with today, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why we're talking about him. And even when you mentioned Dallas, we're not here to, how you say, excuse my language, to kiss ass. It has nothing to do with kiss ass. Because, the audience, usually not to demean, but in the so-called hip hop, if you want to say milieu, right? There are these little jaded, ways of, approaching or understanding, human relation and the world in general. That's why I'm talking about this. I'm saying, you're also trying to translate, if you want to say, for some in the audience that are in that culture, right? Who are not familiar, who might look at it like, oh yeah, why you keep talking about this Leslie and these Dallas? Like, it's because, and part of with this episode, what I think is going to, and I hope will happen, is, again, for people to see that no matter what you're doing in life, right? It's not like I said, you don't just come out of a bubble, right? And it's not, you're not an isolated self, right? There's a world, if you want to say, that you're born into, and that's there to, if you want to say, help, becoming. And this is what I want to highlight. So anyway, so with that said, so for those who don't know, Kori, like Leslie, he's one of the world-renowned engineers, right, in the industry. Yeah. Like Beyonce, Grammy nominated. You mentioned Cash Money.
Right, multi Grammy wins. I mean, the man mixed "Happy" for Pharrell. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So this is who we're talking about. In Dallas Austin, although he might not be, how do you call it? Not that he's not in the industry, but for those, again, who are interested in music and arts and hip hop and R&B, this is like an instrumental figure, not just in Atlanta music, but in R&B in general, right? Like,
absolutely.
TLC, this is that dude.
Voice to Men. I mean, he's Michael Jackson. I mean, Madonna. Cher. I can go down the list. Pink.
There you go. So this is why I'm doing this, so that people can, to contextualize it, right? So so moving ahead. So from your internship, so you were working with Leslie, and you're working with Dallas at the same time, or?
No. So the Dallas chapter of my life was while I was at Morehouse. So this was before any of the engineering stuff. This was all just the business stuff related. So yeah, like I never actually, after I got into engineering, I to this day I've never actually worked directly with Dallas, but I worked, because at that time Leslie had transitioned from working with Dallas to being his basically being his own freelance engineer, but he was based out of Patchwork Studios. Yeah. See, Dallas had his own studio, and then Leslie moved to a different studio, Patchwork, and then that's where I got the internship at Patchwork.
Yeah, that's another, again, renowned studio in Atlanta, like helping, I would say, at least from, being, if you want to say, a student of the game, for me, I would say the Atlanta that we have today in the music industry, I don't think you would have that had there been no. Maybe that's hold on. Let me think about it. So I'm like, and you let me know what you think, right? So to
Yeah, yeah,
me,
yeah.
it seems to me that and the trajectory of like, if you want to say the musical, hip hop genre or R&B or
Uh-huh.
urban music in Atlanta, what we have today, it seems to me that Patchwork as an entity played a pivotal role in helping it become what it
A-
is. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just because it was such a staple for a lot of artists that started their careers like Atlanta art. I'll just say Atlanta artists 'cause I don't want to
Yes,
say Atlanta artists because they're world renowned artists now.
yes, yes.
But a lot of Patchwork incubated a lot of that energy in Atlanta. And the whole philosophy with Patchwork was when they first opened up their doors and some of their early clients were like Goody Mob and Outkast.
Mm-hmm.
And what they were finding, and they had it was just like a small studio, is these artists would come in and they would record their records there and then they would still ship them off to LA to get mixed in these big, studios. And
Yes.
so then Patchwork expanded and created a big mix room so that you can keep all of the everything in Atlanta. And that's how they grew. And over the years, I mean, countless like classic records have been recorded and mixed out of Patchwork.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess you would agree that Patchwork was.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you almost have to you can put it in you can compare it to like what Abbey Road Studios in London means to like rock and to hip hop.
Yes.
That's almost where you could put it as far as like studios or whatnot.
Yeah, by way of analogy. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And even funny enough, I work with the West Coast. Like, so Patchwork is not just Atlanta. Like the Atlanta
Mhm.
sound, it's hip hop in general. Because in the West Coast, there's Ras Kass, for example. I know he had relationship with a lot of people in
Yeah.
Patchwork.
But so the story with that
Yeah.
Raz and the owners of Patchwork grew up together. And the whole reason why it was called Patchwork is because they grew up in a neighborhood in Carson, California called the Cabbage Patch. And
uh,
so that's the relation there. So yeah, that's how Raz Kaz and like he's like fam. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So shout out to like Ras Kass, man, and not to toot my own horn, but we got something marvelous that we
Yeah, I
did
was
on
gonna
the
say
next
yeah,
record.
which are some dope records.
Yes, yes. Thank you, man. Okay. So now, so at which point would you say in your journey? So after you've or while you're say being an assistant at Patchwork, Leslie,
Mhm.
etc. When did you start? Begin to fly on your own, for lack of a better term.
I would say if I had to give a timeline, I
Yeah,
probably
not to
intern.
cut you. Also, can you
Yeah.
situate us in terms of timeline? What year is that? Because I'm
Okay.
realizing
Yeah.
we didn't
Okay.
talk years at all.
Nah. So okay. I'll establish the timeline.
Yes.
So starting from my career in the music industry. So I graduated Full Sail at the end of 2003
Mm-hmm.
and moved back up to Atlanta. This was like November 2003. Is when I started my internship at Patchwork.
Yes.
Um, Interned roughly for about a year to roughly about I would say like September, October, November, somewhere in that ballpark of 2004. And interning, like I said, it was just all the grunt work. And after I interned, I transitioned into becoming Leslie's mixing assistant. And so I assisted Leslie pretty much from 2004 to about 2006, 2007 timeframe. And in that time, see, with Leslie, when he would have these mix sessions, because all he did was mix, he didn't record at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he'd be mixing these records, sometimes the artist would come in and they would be like, all right, well, I want to change a couple of lines on the record. Leslie would throw me in the fire because I'm new. So, I'm learning, but I haven't been in the chair enough to really be comfortable. So there were times that he would throw me in the fire with like major artists to record them because they had to change little lines here and there. And one particular, I'll just give you one quick little story
Yeah.
with getting thrown in the fire. So this was 2000, I want to say late 2004, early 2005. We were in the process of mixing Sierra's first album.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the days that he was scheduled to mix a record, everyone shows up to the studio, and Sierra's people were like, "Well, Ludacris is on his way up here. He's got to drop a verse for the album, Leslie, we're just gonna record today. We're not gonna mix. So Leslie does one of these. He pushes back from the console and he says, "All right, Kori, that's all you." He picks up his bag and he just walks out and leaves. And I'm sitting there like, okay, we got Ludacris coming in. I've never recorded someone of that stature yet.
Yeah.
Let me just be cool. And Luda came in. He was super cool. I recorded him without any glitches or any issues. And so I'm saying all that to say is like Leslie, he knew, he was confident in my skills enough to walk away, and that actually built the confidence in me to continue on and build my skills as an engineer and get comfortable in the seat. So it was in that process that while I'm assisting a mixer, I'm developing my ears, because I was, assisting a mixer, and you can't help but learn in a room while he's mixing. And then when he's done mixing, I'm doing clean edits and all that stuff. But at the same time, I was learning how to record. And so that's what helped me into the transition of, typical audio engineer starts out as an intern, transitions into recording, and then sometimes evolves into mixing or mastering or whatever. So that's usually like the trajectory of a career. And so that process with Leslie helped me transition into the recording phase of my career. And as a lot of people say in the game, a lot of it is being prepared for the opportunity to present itself. And that opportunity came one day when, I was towards the tail end of assisting Leslie. I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm comfortable recording. And Gucci Mane happened to be at Patchwork. And he was working with an engineer and just they weren't gelling or whatnot. And so he was threatening to just cancel his session and leave. Of course, the studio was like, well, nah, we want to make sure we keep our client happy.
Yeah.
And so they came, I was actually assisting Leslie that day, and they actually came and got me out of the session and said, hey, Kori, do you mind? We're calling around. We can't get anyone up here. Do you mind going and filling in for the day with Gucci? And I was like, all right, cool. So I go in and I start working with Gucci, and instantly me and him clicked as far as the way we worked and how we did everything, to where he didn't want to work with anybody else. And so that was my natural transition out from assisting Leslie into the recording phase of my career. And that was like late 2006, early 2007. And so from about 2007 to about 2010, 11, it was just like day in and day out with Gucci. All, and he was one of those that we probably on average worked 5-6 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day. And that was in that time when he was putting out songs what felt like every other week, or putting out projects every other week. So we were on our grind. And in that time in my career, it was like, because of the fast pace of recording and not getting the opportunity, like he would record and you wouldn't get an opportunity to go back in and mix for him to polish it, to put it out. He's wanting to put it out like ASAP. So I got to the point where I was literally mixing while he was recording. So he'd be in the booth and I'm tweaking on the board and doing all this stuff, so that by the time he walked out and I'm, making some last minute adjustments, I'm running that bounce, knowing that bounce is going to go out to the world.
Yeah.
And so that's what transitioned me into the whole mixing thing, because it got to the point that, when he was in album mode, the official like label albums that he would record, he would still have other mixers mix some of the stuff, but it slowly started transitioning into him wanting me to mix more of his stuff. And then that's what transitioned me into mixing. And so that's, that kind of brings, and that was more around like 2011, 2012, 2013. And then fast forward to now, I've just been pretty much mixing for the past, I'd say 12 to 15 years. I haven't really been doing any recording. Like, it's funny because I'll be in a session and an artist will want me to record, and I'm the slow guy in the studio. I used to be the fast guy recording, but now I'm the slow guy fumbling around trying to figure out to get everything. So I just have other people record. And now I totally understand why Leslie was like that.
Yes.
It's a skill that if you don't keep doing it, you kind of lose it. So
yeah. So we'll say you started flying on your own by 2007.
Right?
And then by 2011, so that's like 4 years later, you can say now you're a grown, mixer. Not necessarily a grown, mixer.
yeah, exactly.
You come full circle. Okay, so what would you say in your time in the music industry, right? So a lot has changed, obviously. So with, not necessarily technology or gear, but what would you say for you are the what's the greatest change anyway, if that makes sense? If it doesn't make sense, let me know, and then I'll figure out a way to
Hmm.
reformulate it so it can make sense. But in your time in the music
Okay.
industry, being an engineer, working with artists, working with labels, etc., what would you say, apart, like I say, from the typical stuff that new CDs have taken a back, is in the back now, and as everything is digital? What would you say is the greatest change, and from your perspective in the music industry from the time you started to now?
I would say I mean, there's a number of things. I mean, technology obviously has played a major role, but
Hmm.
just the shift in mentality of what I'm perceiving how labels are run today versus how they were run back then.
Hmm.
I would say today labels, and I'm saying major labels, are mostly run almost like tech companies.
Okay.
And it's like a gift and a curse because there's investment in, the technology aspect, and that fuels, the ability for people to be even more creative.
Hmm.
But then it's like the music becomes more of a commodity and less of a personal thing because they're just looking at it. That's like the passion of, okay, let me really incubate this artist and let me really build this artist. No, it's just a numbers driven thing. How many, streams can this artist generate for us? And it just becomes about bottom line, which at the end of the day, it is the music business. So
Hmm.
I get it. But I will say that change has, you know, I will say shifted creativity and collaboration. Whereas like when back in '03, '04, '05, in that time frame, and even probably I'm sure before, artists tend to collaborate together in the studio. Whereas now, as you know, most of the time, you're sending files to an artist that might be in California or someone in New York or da da da. And there's not that energy or that synergy in the room of creating. So that's what I would say the biggest changes. And for me, as a music connoisseur and lover, I have to say that I do notice the difference in the feeling of music that's created today versus back then.
Okay, good. And it wasn't a trick question. Funny enough,
Mhm.
I did want to go. It's a segue now, so it's segue
Yeah.
into. I'm gonna ask you. I guess it's gonna be a little bit philosophical to a certain
Okay.
extent, but what you just described to me, right? You said, and you want to be fair because you say, well, it's the music business, so it's
Right.
a gift and a curse. I think you're being quite diplomatic, from my understanding, but we'll see. You'll see
Mhm.
where I'm getting to with my
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, with that change that you've noticed, right, in the industry, notice it's music business, so it's the music industry. Yes, there's commerce involved in it, but the
Mhm.
the commodity is, in a sense, as you just mentioned, that's being sold and marketed is music. Um,
Right.
with what you just described, right? It seems to me, and I'll see, like I'm gonna see if you agree or not, right? It
Mhm.
seems to me that the change is not just you mentioned technology obviously played a major role, but
Mhm.
it seems to me that what we're doing today, would you still call it music then, right? Because you mentioned this interaction between artists, engineers, musicians, etc.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
has taken a change. Obviously, it's
Right.
being mediated through, I guess, the new technology. As a result, even the labels themselves, you say they've shifted, if you want to say their their modus operandi in a sense, right? They're no
Mhm.
longer you talked about incubating artists, like so at artist development to a certain extent. Now it
Right.
seems
Right.
like it's more tech driven. So philosophically, then, would you say? Because I'll say for me, that is my position. I just want to see where you stand. It's
Mhm.
almost like, to a certain extent, philosophically, it's no longer music that we're selling. Which it's sound clearly, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's not philosophical, I say, in terms of idea of what music is supposed to be by definition. It seems like that's not what we're selling anymore. What's your take on that? Would you agree, disagree? And
The way you frame it, I can understand in that concept or in that context. Absolutely, we're not selling music
mm,
because it's not it's no longer about the cultural impact, if you will, and the emotional impact of music.
mm,
It's literally about numbers and which is, like I said, it's the business,
mm,
but it's almost like you look at the music industry now, and you look at how, it's almost like the music is given away for free pretty much. And it's like, okay, but you're trying to sell everything else in the around it, like that's connected to it. You're not selling the music per se, whereas back in the day, on Tuesdays, you would go get the latest release and it's a physical copy.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's almost like the music is almost like a hook to hook you in to buy this product or to buy this thing or to do whatever. So it's almost a marketing tool more so than just, how we remember how we would define music.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the best way I can describe the relationship right now, the
Mm-hmm.
way the industry is.
Mm-hmm. So as you see, your response brought something to mind. Recently, I don't know if you've seen it. Also, you'll let me know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's recent, but it's been going over there in the internet. I've seen it a while. So I think it's Will I Am, who somebody
Mm-hmm.
was showing how Will I Am was describing how, I guess from his understanding, the history of the development or the coming about of the music industry, with the bootleggers way back, I guess, in the early 1900s, who
Mm-hmm.
were selling liquor, etc., through, Canada, during prohibition. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I believe Will I Am, he mentioned how kind of what you just said, right? It's almost like, well, the those the bootleggers, right? What they were really trying to sell is liquor. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the artists, I don't know if it's just the black artists, because he seemed to focus on the black artists, but from my understanding of the history, so it's the artists in general. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, Will I Am seemed to be suggesting that, and like I say, seems to be suggesting, because I haven't talked to him. I'm just going by what I understood, by what he was explaining. It's almost like, well, what they were
Mm-hmm.
really selling is liquor. It's just they use the artist through the Chitlin circuit, etc. Right? They promoted the artist, right? But it's not really the artistry technically that they were interested in selling. It's the
Yeah.
liquor. You know what I'm saying? So he said this. I'll let you speak just to conclude.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that he's saying what you're saying too today. Me now, here's my response. Okay, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying you agree or disagree with him. You're just describing a state of fact, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think he's doing that too. But in stating the fact, he seems to be suggesting that, well, it's almost like, not that he's being dismissive of some of the problematics that we're noticing today, but he seems to be like, well, it is what it is. We have to figure out a way to adapt. I think that's what I got from the little
Mm-hmm.
video that I saw that Will I Am was saying. So me
Yeah.
now, so you know how they say purist? I don't think I would consider myself a purist per se. I think that that doesn't really fit what where I stand. Here's my response to it, and then let's see how you respond to my response to this Will I
I
Am
got you.
statement, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, okay, that's fair. So initially, if he's correct in his interpretation of the history of the development of the music industry, initially, the bootleggers, they weren't really trying to sell music; they were just selling liquor, and then it just happened to be what we have today is what we had in the past, and that seems to be transformed to what it is today. It was a byproduct of selling liquor, etc. And
Uh-huh.
in a sense, we gotta adapt. I say, okay, that's fair. Okay, this is why I was asking you the initial question. Then, well, so maybe I'm gonna reformulate what my view also, right? So it's okay. You know what they called the music industry was really, it's not really music. Like I said, that they were selling. So
Mm-hmm.
as such, what I've come to realize, right? So one of the things that I think, in order for see, there you go again, I'm gonna have to use those terms, pure true artist, because
Mm-hmm.
we need words to make a distinction between what I think right that I'm proposing and what the what Will I Am seem to be stating, and what in fact the music industry or the record industry seem to be. So I'm saying,
Uh-huh.
I think that it's almost like, well, today, so somebody like myself, I do music, and I'm trying to produce what I think is, high quality, high standard art, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, process it through technology, right, into a product, a commodity that I can put out there for sale, right, to the public. So So me, it's music that I'm trying to sell,
Right.
right? So I'm
Right.
not.
Right.
So it's almost like we need to have. That's why I'm saying it's a philosophical. It's the way we view. This is why I'm glad that we're having this exchange, right?
Yeah.
Myself and you. I think in this greater discussion, like everyone who's involved in it, whether it be it the fans and engineers, artists, etc., is like, well, you know what? We need to delineate exactly what we're talking about and stipulate what it is that we're trying to. In fact, it's business itself. Like, well, what are you selling? What product are you selling? Well, me, I'm trying to
Right.
sell music. I'm not trying to
Right.
sell necessarily clothes. The clothing and everything else that you just mentioned, right? That seems to be the focus of the record industry today. For me, it's not that I'm not selling or I'm not trying to sell those either. These are the
Hmm.
byproduct to me. They're what's
Right.
around the greater product that I'm trying to sell, music. So I think we need to have a a distinction, like an explicit distinction, right, between
Uh-huh.
the so-called traditional record industry and people who are selling or promoting art. Does that make
Hmm.
sense to you? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say to that, like philosophically speaking, right? So if you look at the industry, if you look at most industries,
Mm-hmm.
like in music, we'll use music, right? So you have artists, you have people that are on the creative side that actually care about the creativity and this and that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have a perspective. Then you have like labels and they have a perspective. And what I, philosophically speaking, in a perfect scenario, all of it works to get together to accomplish every individual's ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like your goal as an artist, as a creative, is to sell music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can do that and you can sell music and you can be successful in selling the music, like you said, the byproduct that comes from that is clothing and touring and this and that. So now you're not focused on the clothing and touring, but a business guy that says, okay, well, this guy, I can't do what Gundy does. I can't rap or sing, but if I can give him the tools that he needs to be able to be successful as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
I can make money I might be a t-shirt genius. I can make money on the t-shirt. So then now that's my focus. So Gundy's making his money on the music. I'm making my money on the t-shirts. Now his music is attracting people that actually want to see him perform.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're scratching the itch of somebody that doesn't create but just is attracted to the feeling and the experience of music.
Mm-hmm.
So they're willing to pay for that, which ultimately makes you successful as an artist financially. So the ecosystem can work
Mm-hmm.
if it's respected and those boundaries, if you want to call them boundaries, are defined. The problem is the way the industry now is, it's almost like, okay, here's a good example,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take sports, right?
Yeah.
When a basketball team says that they can pay LeBron James $50 million a year to play for the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
The owner of that basketball team recognizes, I'm not selling basketball. I'm selling a show, and I'm trying to put people in the seats in my arena. And I know that having this person, LeBron, he's going to attract the most people. That's why I don't mind paying him that, because that is a fraction of what I'm going to make off of his talent, if you will. You can translate that to any type of industry, especially the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
These labels look at it like, okay, well, this person has some talent, or not even talent. These days, it's not about talent, because
Yeah.
a lot of it is about numbers. This person has 1 million followers on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like built-in metrics that, okay, I can just invest in that, and that's going to help me reap a reward.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, philosophically, in a perfect world, it would be a mutual respect of all areas of expertise. Like, okay, this person is the creative, so I need this person to attract these people over here so that I can make money, but I have to be fair to the person that's attracted. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's such a weird space to be in, because for us that are purists, if like you said, like purists, that our goal, we just love the music,
Mm-hmm.
it makes you feel like, well, damn, like it's hard to have a passion for it when you just feel like everyone else is just trying to take and not give back and not build or not do anything. I mean, it's just like, I don't know of any other industry that a company can invest in, like, let's say that the cliche, or I won't even call it cliche, most labels bet on signing and putting out, let's just give a whole number, like let's just say 100 artists,
Mm-hmm.
and they're betting on only one of those artists being profitable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any other business that would be a model that would be a successful
Successful.
model. You see what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
just like, okay, you go in business to make money. So I'm not going to, and you do the research up front to make the money. You don't sit there and say, okay, I'm going to throw money over here and over here and throw it against the wall and see what sticks. But in the music industry, that's what it is. And the reason why that is because that one that does hit cancels out and makes it make sense for all of the 99 other failures.
Mm-hmm.
But from the creative side, I think that kills something, because then it's like, I don't want to call it a gatekeeper in the sense that you're keeping out people, but I do think that within every industry, I do think that not everyone, I think the accessibility to creating and putting out music is so simple now that it's watered down the quality, and it's hard for like the quality music, or the real true pure music to rise to the top and be to the forefront, because of all the other noise that's there now
Mm-hmm.
in that space. And so that's a paradigm shift too, that is also affecting the overall industry.
Mm-hmm. So you see it. So as you eloquently, explained, um, what to add on anyway, right? In our discussion, to
Uh-huh.
continue in our discussion. So it's a greater problem, right? So in this discussion, like you hear, I see different podcasts. What's his name? Ray Daniels, etc. These
Hmm.
types of individuals. Salute to him. They're doing a great job. But see, in the greater discussion, I think this dynamic, right, or this dimension that I think we're talking about. This is why, again, I really appreciate this little detour. It's not a detour, but
Hmm.
that we're
Yeah.
taking right now. So I think so the issue or the question, for me not to call it necessarily a problem. So the greater question is, so society itself. So when we mention technology, as technology developed and evolved, there were shifts also that were happening in society. Because to be fair, right? So for us not to keep knocking on, if you want to say, the labels or the business individuals or representatives. Well, to a
Hmm.
certain extent, to some of them, it may not be that they're necessarily morally mischievous or evil, right? Like as you say, well, no, they're businessmen, so they're coming there, particular entities with a particular mind frame, right? Business, commerce,
Hmm.
right? And
Right.
that's fair. Now, that's why I say it's a greater societal. I don't want to use the term problem, like a question that we need to talk and think through, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like we're not necessarily, at least a lot of us are not doing this. You'll see where I'm going. So the consumers, for lack of better term, or the so-called fans also, that's what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Like there's a greater shift, and you talked about a paradigm, right? Like the
Hmm.
paradigm change. So the people also, they're not, for lack of better term, educated to appreciate um, art for art's sake also anymore. It seems to me that's why it's so easy. Even when you use the LeBron James and NBA, for example, analogy, right? It's the same thing. The people who are going to watch the LeBron James, usually they're fans of the sport of basketball, right? They have a certain
Hmm.
um, knowledge. There's a it's a more intimate relationship between, I say, the fan and the business of basketball itself, right? Whereas in the music industry, to me today, when you
Hmm.
mentioned that's why I say that with the technology, when the shifts were happening in the early 2000s, right, with
Hmm.
the digital, if you want to say, as the digital era took more prominence, right,
Hmm.
the 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 music and the whole processes of creating music, you didn't say it like that, but I think it's implicit in what you were saying. It became accessible to everyone. In fact, today,
Yeah.
this is why you have, through the internet, you go on YouTube, you find, now I'm not knocking YouTube and I'm not knocking what's happening, right? But you'll see what I'm saying. So you go on YouTube, there's a bunch of um, videos that are there available for people to, they say, learn, right?
Right.
Learn different, if you want to say, um, uh, practices, right? So
Yeah.
with the technology, music became more music making became more accessible to the greater public. So someone can go in
Mhm.
YouTube, watch a tutorial, right? With the, again, through the ease that the new technology facilitated. Oh, now you're a producer. Now you're an engineer. Now you're a
Mhm.
singer, right? But even though, like I say, philosophically or and essentially, well, you're not really that, because this is why I took my time also, and I said in the beginning that I wanted to contextualize your history, right? So you can see, look, it's a whole processes that makes Kori, not just the individual Kori Anders, the mixing
Mhm.
engineer, right? This processes with the new technology, technically, you bypass a bunch of steps. You bypass the fundamental step
Right.
of, as you said in the beginning, from the beginning already, you already had, for lack of a better term, what we call, or you've called it that too, like, well, you had a certain passion for music making, right?
Mhm.
Even though you chose on your path, on your journey, you chose, hey, you know what? I might go into law, for example, but it's as a step towards me doing what it is that I really want to do with the new
Right.
technology. So I'll shut up and make space for you.
Yeah.
Um, what happened, I think, to give some, I think the fans also, the so-called fans, also have to take some responsibility, and some of us need to speak. It's not to speak down on them, but to hopefully, as we're talking, that so some of the fans could come to realize that also, that hey, you know what? You don't really have a passion for music. Most fans, you didn't have a passion for music. That's why I say it's a whole
Mhm.
philosophical thing that we have to do. A lot of the term artist is so loosely used now. Just like, again, an engineer is like anyone can be an engineer. No,
Right.
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 So you get so I'll shut up there and to get your input. So you see, I think that's what I'm saying. Like, we need to talk about this, through this paradigm shift, and the fact that, as we said, people like consumers or fans also have to take some of the responsibility and check themselves and realize, hey, you know what? I'm not necessarily an artist. I might want to do this for, hey, you know what, clout or for whatever, but it's not art
Right.
that you really want to do. You want clout. And oh, you notice that people are getting popularity because of music or because of engineering. So, oh, I'm gonna go on YouTube and get a tutorial. Oh, it's easy. The
Right.
softwares allow you, especially with the AI today, right? It'll allow you to, in a sense, imitate and simulate what Kori, for example, may be doing. So now, oh, you
Mhm.
found some kind of success and you label yourself an engineer, but in fact, right, procedurally, you're not that. Does that you get what I'm saying? I think this is part that
Right.
we need to discuss
Yeah.
more.
Nah, I understand what you're saying, but I will say with that,
Mhm,
at the end of the day, perception is reality,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And so even though, like, because one thing there's two schools of thought. There's, you remember how growing up your parents were like, I remember I used to have to do da da da, I had to
mhm,
walk da da da, and I look at it like every generation, the goal is that, just for me, I want my son to have it easier than I did.
mhm,
So that's, if you want to call it easier. And so I translate that to, let's just say, the music industry, right? To where I know my steps for getting to where I am now in my career, right?
mhm,
If I had to go back, I would do it all again, do it the same way, because I know that that's equipped me with certain tools and certain skills that help me navigate certain things that, you know, engineers today may not know how to navigate because they haven't had to deal with it, but or the backstory. And it's just like, the whole analog versus digital,
mhm,
talk as far as sound quality or this and that. And for someone that has experienced both and can appreciate both, I can recognize, okay, well, if I want to get this feel, this analog feel in this digital realm, I know how to do that because I experienced actual analog,
mhm,
right? And
mhm,
that's an example. And so I never really look at it like, okay, nowadays, anyone can do X, Y, and Z, because at the end of the day, the cream still ultimately rises to the top. And so I think that, when you truly have a passion for something, like for me, for engineering, it's like, okay, I know that I never look at it like it's competition with everyone else that claims they're an engineer or this and that. I always look at like, okay, whatever's meant for me is meant for me. And I just know that you know, there's how many billions of people on this earth? There's a ton of people, and everyone, like, what I would love to see technology wise
mhm,
is how to harness people's true, what's the word I'm looking for? True preferences. So,
mhm,
like, for instance, right? like I come, I love like that golden era of hip hop, the, late 90s, early 2000s hip hop. Like that's my golden era of hip hop for me, as far as like the stuff that I love, that I resonate with. If you listen to playlist driving, that's what I love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those artists, right? Those artists these days, labels haven't figured out how to successfully, consistently market those artists from both the vast majority of those artists to today's people.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, like, if I go on to Tidal or Apple Music or whatnot, it's hard to get an algorithm to tone out all the noise of everything that's coming out, because uploading every day to the streaming platforms is millions of thousands, if not millions of songs, right?
True.
And figuring out a way to dial in people's preferences to where, okay, just because I'm not interested in little so and so from around the way, it doesn't even get on my radar. That's what I would love to see happen,
Mm-hmm.
as far as like, because at the end of the day, there's no way, like, just like you said, you can go on YouTube and you can find 50,000 different how-to videos, how to do this, or you should use this compressor, you should use, for anything that you can think of, any industry that you can think of. But if there's a way to focus that so that, okay, this and solely this resonates with me, and I don't have to even be conscious of what else is going on. I think that's, to me, that's where the technology would be dope,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. And I hate to put it like that, because at a certain point, then sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So then it might cut you off the things that you might be interested in, because it assumed that you're not. So it's like, that's the paradigm shift that you're talking about. Like, I totally get it. Cause it's just like you said, anyone can go on and, they might not have a passion for rapping, but they might have a talent for rapping,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they go and they mess around and get a hit record or whatnot. And then, you, for someone that has a talent and a passion, might not get the same look that this person got over here. And then you're sitting there like, well, dang, they're not even passionate about it. But look at that. And I'm sitting here just, if I got on that platform, I would be able to be just as successful. And that's the thing that's almost like I don't know if it's like the duality of just life in general. And it's just like, when it's hard to describe, because it's almost like comparison is a thief of joy. And it's just like, when you get back to just saying, okay, I'm walking my path, that was meant for that guy, then I think that brings a level of peace. But it is difficult when you see it all and it's all in your face, and you're like, I remember a day where that wouldn't have gotten past quality control
Mm-hmm.
from a label. So a label would never put that out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just like one of the things that I consistently deal with as a mixer is artists being in love with their rough mix. And because they've listened to it so much, that anything that I do that's different than their rough mix, it's perceived to them as wrong,
Mm-hmm.
even though what I'm doing is sonically making it viable for the masses to appreciate, because they've never heard the record. You know what I mean? And so that dynamic, to where it's like, you see like the quality of sound going down in that regard, because artists are making their decision. No, I'm standing on this. I want that rough mix out. I know it sounds grimy and da da da. I like that, blah blah blah. But it's like, that's also a form of like, it's hard to call it killing music, because then, how do you argue with an artist that puts out a horrible sounding rough mix, but the song ends up being successful? You can't argue with that. So it's like, in your mind, you're like, okay, well, I heard that differently. And, because there's plenty of songs that I've mixed that they've ended up going with the rough mix,
Mm-hmm.
that to this day, I can't listen to. I'll just go back, and I love the songs, and I'll just have them on my little playlist, and I'm just listening to my mix. And it's not to toot my horn. It's
Yeah.
just, okay, knowing what it is, and honestly being in a position to say, I wish that we could put out both and let the consumer decide what they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that. So yeah, it's such a weird space to be in right now in this industry.
Yeah. So a quick add on, and then we'll shift gear. I hope we're not
Mhm.
getting too deep.
Yeah, no
But,
worries, no worries.
so, as you mentioned again, this, and I want to emphasize that. I think it's very important. It's not that I'm trying to emphasize, specifically the dimension of technical specialization, but when you mentioned, for example, artists being, familiar with, rough mix, and therefore that is what, their ears are tuned into, and therefore they're familiar with it. So they're
Hmm.
They prefer that to, they generally, let me say generally, to be fair, they'll generally prefer that to a finally tuned mix. So
Hmm.
here's what I want to, that's why I say, like, not, it's not to special to focus or overemphasize or technical or academic person. It doesn't have to be academic, but
Right.
part of the reason that I think, general, because myself, I suffered from that, right? And initially, that's why I'm a perfect example of that. Being an artist
Hmm.
and also a composer, a producer, I'll produce a track, yada, yada, but I'm not a mixing engineer, right? So
Hmm.
in my head, when I conceived of the idea of a song, I heard it somewhere and then I put it, I produced it, I composed it, done. However, being the fact that I'm not because you were talking about, you'll see what I'm saying, right? Because it seemed to me you were struggling a little bit, right? And you're with yourself, right? You said there's duality between, well, there are some songs that have been released, for example, the rough mix, and the public ate it up, and it went out to become a hit, for example, right? And
Hmm.
whereas you, as the mixing engineer, you're like, damn, that's the the sound, the quality of the sound is crappy. It's not mixed. You get what I'm saying? And I
Hmm.
think so.
Right.
What I would say is like, well, no, you're right. You're right to. So music. So that's what I'm saying again. By definition, this is why I say I think it's, for me, it's important. Education, and like I say, I don't necessarily mean institutional or academic. Like you
Yeah.
say, we have YouTube, right? So, but we need more, for lack of a better term, experts to emphasize again. So when we say music, what you were defining is this duality like that you were doing. I was like, yeah, no,
Hmm.
it's not necessarily conflicting. It's a synergy between both, right? So
Right.
music by definition would be that. Like, so you have sounds, you know how they say, like, the simple definition, right? So you have a bunch of sounds in nature. You, as the engineer, what you do is you say organized sound, or Atlanta to shout out
Right.
organized noise, right? So
Nice noise. Yeah.
your job as mixing engineers to take the noises or the sounds that I, as the composer slash artist, that I heard in my head, and oh yeah, I put it all together, right? That's a first step into putting together. Now, if I'm trained
Hmm.
also as someone who understands, because there's a science to it also, right? There's,
Yeah.
understanding, if you want to say, the science of sound. Like you talk, like, this is not my field, where you start getting real technical now, which, frequency in hertz, how it's
Yeah.
measured, etc. You technically are supposed to know that as the mixing engineer. I'm not
Right.
aware of that. In the past, at
Right.
least, I wasn't aware of all that. So I'm just creating, like I said, I'm organizing sound, and it sounds good, but it's not yet finished. So in the process of creating music, now, if I
Hmm.
have all these sets of skills, as to understand, if you want to say, for lack of a better term, the science of music, well, I could have a
Hmm.
complete product by myself. But at some point, I had to come to realize, right, that, hey, you know what? I don't have that skills. In fact, that's how um, when I first contacted you, this was it. It's because this is what I mean by when you talked about preferences, right, or passion.
Hmm.
Because I had the passion of making music and its complexity and totality, right? I had to
Hmm.
come to this realization myself that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I know that this sounds good. I've organized all these sounds. I had this idea of taking these sounds, right, in nature and
Hmm.
using these instruments, technology, right, to do that. But
Right.
yet I came to realize, but it's not complete. There's something missing. And I didn't have
Hmm.
the skills to do that yet, right? So I wanted to know, well, who are the best at doing that? Not just
Hmm.
because, I'll stop there to see what you're going to respond
Yeah.
also in that, right? And not just because of, for example, oh, I've seen so and so artists, like, I don't know, Michael Jackson, Beyonce, whatever, pick one, or Pharrell sounded this, or Gucci, right? It says, well, I had to come to realize that, well, the reason that Gucci sounds that way, it's not just, there's something that I didn't know. So I needed to know. So I
Hmm.
researched. Oh, how you said back in the day you had the records. So I had to look at the credits. Like, oh, I saw Leslie. At first I couldn't commute. So I figured out a way. Thank God for the internet, see, in that sense, because initially
Yeah.
I was in Canada at that point, right? So I would
Hmm.
not be able to immediately. I'm not in Atlanta. I'm not going to find I don't have a direct access to, say, for example, Patchwork Studios, find the address and go. No, I don't have that. So thank God for
Hmm.
the internet. Like, oh, read the excerpts. Like, it's, oh, Leslie Brathwaite, Kori did this, or Kori was the mixing assistant for that, right? So I figure out a way
Hmm.
to communicate with you so that I can get, if you want to say, that's why I say it's a music and itself, it's a complex processes, right, of
Yeah.
uh, acts, right, that needs to be done so you can have that. So I'll shut up there. So I think, again, that's what I mean by education. And I say you don't have to go to
Yeah.
school for that. I didn't necessarily go to school to study music, right? It's just because I had the desire, one, and I also realized, hey, I have the natural talent, but that was insufficient. I know that was insufficient, right? So I knew that
Right.
I needed more. I didn't go to school, but at least, like I said, through the advance of the internet, I was throwing some shots at, the YouTube, tutorials, for
Right. Right. Right.
example, but you see, they were beneficial to me in that sense. I was able to find a Kori, a Leslie, or whatever, and so that I can get the finishing touch, if you, for lack of a better term, right? So anyway,
Yeah.
all this is to say what you were saying, like this duality that you were talking about, that seemed to be, in a sense, dichotomous. I say, no, it's not necessarily. There's no dichotomy there. It's a synergy, right, between both aspects, right? There's the
Right.
first the composition, and then there's the guy who's gonna put this composition into order, proper order, so
Right.
that you can have music,
Right.
right? You dig?
Yeah. Yeah. And like to give you the best analogy I can give you with the
Yes.
whole thing, because you're absolutely right. You know, as humans, we are a social species.
Mm-hmm.
And with everything, and you look at everything in life, and I use sports because I was analyze sports.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at like a sports team, right? Now, a football team, a quarterback can throw the ball exceptionally well and can read defenses and know who to throw it to, this and that. A wide receiver might not be the best at throwing the ball, but can catch the ball,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you translate that to music, I can't play anything on the piano. I can't sing. I can't dance. I can't, I can. I like to say I can write a little bit of poetry here and there, and that type of stuff. But I clearly, I know my skill set is more so mixing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But understanding, and this is what I think separates engineers too, when you're in the realm of mixing, is those that have the technical knowledge, but still have the feeling and have the ability to let the music dictate what you need to do so that you're still maintaining that feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a duality in and of itself. And I'm saying all that to say is that, like, in anything, in music, when you understand that everyone has their specialty in their position,
Mm-hmm.
and when you allow everyone to play that position,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the brilliance is. That's where you have great outcomes and great everything. And it's only when you have, an engineer that said, might be egotistical and say, no, it's my way or the highway, and this is how it should be, and da da da, and art, there's all that, the synergy is lost.
Mm-hmm.
The synergy is in there where everyone understands what they're bringing to the table, and everyone's goal is to make something, and they all have a mutual, target
Mm-hmm.
and goal at hand, and they understand that, and that's the team in it. So at the end of the day, it's a team process,
Yeah.
and everyone plays a role in that. Even like, I mean, I remember reading, like, back in the day, actually talking to engineers, like how Kanye does it. Like, if when Kanye, I don't know if he still does it now, but back in the day, he was giving production credit or publishing to everyone in the
Mm-hmm.
room when something was created. So if you happen to be an intern sitting in on the session, if you were in there at the creation of something, he looked at that as your energy was part of that, of creating that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's truly, I really think that's the human experience, that nothing, I won't say nothing, because, you never want to say never, but I can't picture that being reproduced by technology. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's innately something that's human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that, with music, because like the big discussion now is like how AI is affecting, jobs as creatives or as engineers or this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that. And I don't feel threatened by it. I look at it like how you were talking about earlier, like it's a tool. It's facilitating things, but there's still, because it's art and it's music, there's still a human touch to when you have people that are passionate about the art and not just passionate about the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my mind would be at with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, yeah, in closure, as we move along and we are growing to the end of our conversation also.
Mhm.
I could go on for days in this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we might have to have a part two.
Definitely. But I think what we need to take, at least at this segment of our discussion, what, those of y'all who are listening, is that, again, it's, as you mentioned, this social component, right? And this communal. And even as you just said something here, this Kanye, going forward, I might have to think more about that. I'm like, yeah, because that is my view too. But I didn't, the view when you mentioned how Kanye, basically anyone who's participating in the process of
Mhm.
creating this thing that we're going to call music, they are accredited for it to a certain extent. I'm like, and I'm realizing, yeah, you know what, it's true. Like, at least with my engineers, because I mainly do a lot of my own, as I'm sure you'll know, also
Mhm.
work. I do a lot of my stuff. I compose it. The only thing I might play a musician for session, but
Right.
ultimately, what I think that I got from what you just described there, and I don't think you were aiming at me, is me. I'm literally telling you this is what I got. I'm realizing, hey, you know what? It's true. Philosophically, I just define music as this whole processes of like organizing, these sounds and noise and
Mhm.
putting them in a particular order. And I've admitted, right, that, hey, you know what? And that processes, I have a lack, right? And
Mhm.
what's the lack? It's the finishing touch of, you know, um, putting these sounds into their proper dimension, and
Mhm.
refining and retuning these sounds that I might have taken, created, for lack of a better term, these sounds. But
Yeah.
I realize that I have that lack. Oh, that's why I holler at Kori. Now, I
Right.
might pay Kori, but I'm realizing, hey, you know what? Going forward, man, I might have to definitely credit you also, because if it's, or in any engineer that does anyway, at least what it is that I
Yeah.
think that we're talking about here. Well, it's true. If you I remember, okay, our last the last project, right, that upcoming anyway, like Corey actually did. Yeah, you did all the mixes, in fact, right? So
Mhm.
I remember, I don't know if you remember that, at one point I called you, I'm like, yeah, you know what, you made what I sent you sound the way that I heard it in my head. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? Then that's what I'm like, you know what, going for it, yeah, we had to talk. Gotta credit you. No, it's true, because you're right. Because had you not done, or were able to do what it is that you did, it would not have, I would not have been able to. It's like, okay, I'll say it this way, and I'll shut up for real, right? And we can
No.
move on. It is exactly, that is the view. We didn't say it that way. By way of analogy, it's like you being a married man, you got a wife. Well, it takes a man and a woman, not to be super political here, at least in as far as it stands right now, two individuals, a male or female, that are healthy or whatever, they come together to produce and create a baby, a child, right? So
Mhm.
in that sense, we're both contributing, right, in conceiving and making and bringing about that child. So I say we can see the music, by way of analogy, as that way. I could not
Yeah.
have done it by myself. I have, you know what I mean? Like, I needed Corey to bring out, the final touch. So in that sense, yes, I agree with you. In a
Right.
business sense, y'all should be credited as co-producers.
Right. But even taking it a step further, like the inspiration for the music,
Yeah,
technically, okay, what inspired you to create that?
yeah,
That should be credited as
yeah. I
well. Like
agree.
it's all, yeah, if you want, but I'm saying it's at the end of the day, it's a melting pot
Yeah,
of working together. And what you just said is what is a distinguishing feature between different engineers, because and that's why some engineers don't work with certain artists or vice versa. It's not because it's a bad engineer or the artist is bad. It's just because that synergy is not there.
hmm,
It'd be like the equivalent of like, because I love music so much and I honor like how music is created and recognize the quote unquote the vibe, if you will, or those non-tangible items that go into the creation, it'd
essence.
be the equivalent, yeah, the essence, it'd be the equivalent of like someone saying, oh, well, Jay-Z's looking for an engineer to record his project, right? And the first thing in my mind would be like, Guru's his guy. I would never want to step in that seat because Guru and Jay-Z have something
hmm
special
hmm
that you can't define and no one else can step in and bring, you know what I mean? And so it's like that, it's that type of thing.
hmm
And yeah, we work with a bunch of other people, but I'm just using that as an
Yeah, yeah,
example, as like recognizing, okay, if you want to call it a formula, that's the formula, stick to it because that creates magic,
yeah.
that captures that lightning in a jar.
Hmm,
And so with everything, it's just that's just what it is. And when you have everything working together and that energy being there, that's where the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. And so, moving forward, as I say, as we come to the close of our discussion, um, do you have? I don't know. Maybe you were not. I was gonna say, do you have hope? But you never. You don't seem like the kind of. Maybe I'm talking to myself in that sense because I find it very problematic. You know, for in my end, like where we are right now. If you want to say in the music industry, the world in general, our societies, right? So I don't know. Maybe you don't see it that way. So I don't know. Let me see a way to formulate the question. I would say where. So I'll say this way then, to be more fair. Um, where do you see the music industry going towards?
I, I see
Flourishing,
it.
diminishing, like
Nah, I see it adjusting for the better, if you will, because it's just like, okay, every era, comes to an end, right?
mm,
It comes to a peak and then it fizzles out. And like, it's like it's hard to say there's a wrong or right. It's more so just looking at like, okay, it's like for someone like I'm a hip hop head. I actually like lyricism and, the wittiness and all of that in music and rap and da da da. And for a while in the industry, that was something that was took a back seat, and it was more so the gimmicky, the catchy, no, not really thought provoking stuff that was front and center.
mhm,
And now you're starting to see a transition to where more and more people are starting to appreciate again lyricism, and that's starting to push to the front again. So it's one of those things where like I don't get jaded in my approach and be like, oh, that's wrong, that's wrong. I know what's right for me. And
mhm,
as anyone would say, like, I just look at it like, okay, I have a choice. I don't have to listen to that stuff that I don't like, that I don't appreciate. I can just be over here and listen to what I want to listen to. And it's not that I ignore it. And for me as an engineer, I listen to everything. And one thing
mhm,
at my core, at the foundation, I respect everyone's creativity, even if it isn't my cup of tea.
mhm,
So there's times where I'm mixing records and I'm just like, I'm not feeling this record at all.
yeah,
And so sometimes those are the toughest mixes for me to do because I have to dig and find a space of creating an emotional connection to the record to be able to do what I do for it.
yeah,
And there's only been maybe one or two occasions where it just wasn't in the cards for me. And I gracefully told the artist and the client, like, hey, I can't do anything for you. You should get someone else to mix this record that's actually going to do it because I can't hear it. I don't know. And so that I think that's the creative and the purist, if you will, in me is to know like, okay, I know I'm not going to do this justice, but I respect the art enough to know that to step aside, to step out of the way.
mhm, mhm,
And I think that if more people in this game understood that aspect of it, whether you want to talk about the labels and how they run it and this and that, I think that the art and the music would be a lot better. You would have, I won't say better because better is relative.
mhm,
Some people, things that I think are good, other people might think are bad. But I just think that like, I think about like the LaFace era
mhm,
of hip hop. Like when you had Babyface and LA Reid running this label in Atlanta, and you look at everything that came out of that.
yeah,
And it was just like you had creatives, they're executive minded, but at their core they love the music,
mhm,
and it showed in the
the
apps that they put
quality,
out, the quality of
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And so the to me the model, that's the model that shouldn't ever be broken.
yeah,
You can still have these CEOs at the top that are just business minded, but the smart business mind would be like, okay, the CEO, let's hire and put people in position in power that are the creative aspect of it, that are going to ensure that the music and that the art doesn't suffer because I'm up at the top looking at a spreadsheet and just looking at numbers.
mhm,
So when you have that duality and that thing, that's where you have, to me, that's the best case scenario.
mhm,
And that's how I think, you have artists that spawn into becoming, global icons, and their music is loved, and it's, they have the longevity. Whereas you have a lot of artists that might have 2 million views on TikTok this year, and then next year they're nowhere to be found. You don't know about them
they're not
because
resonating at a
they're
deeper,
not resonating. And at the end of the day, I've had conversations with folks and they're like, yeah, you just don't see superstars like you used to see them. And part of that is because the curtains brought back and just the sheer accessibility. Like it's almost like social media, and you almost blame social media for that because it's like you want as a fan, it's like you're intrigued by artists, right? So you want to know about them and you're intrigued by even like their day to day sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But at that, the expense of that is that dilutes the mystique.
Yeah.
So it's like the artists that maintain that mystique end up continuing to be superstars. I can't go on Instagram and see Beyonce is sitting at the cafe in Paris right now eating breakfast. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's everything is very curated so that you see only what they want you to see and they maintain that sense of mystique. And that's what maintains their level of stardom above and beyond. I mean, obviously the talent is there, but that other aspect of it. And so, it's one of those things where it's like, I wish that we could get away from just looking at numbers
Mm-hmm.
and just get to closing our eyes and telling ourselves and letting ourselves feel how the music makes us feel and letting that be the metric.
Yeah, yeah. It's boundaries. The term that I remember that you used is, and I think we need not be afraid. That's the term. It's the boundaries. We need proper delineation. Like A&Rs have to be A&Rs, and they have to have the talent, the capacity to do it. As you said, a numbers person has to be a numbers person that has the talent and the gifts and the skill set to do it and engineer, etc. Right? So we need not. We need to go back. But like, I don't like the term "go back." I don't mean going back in terms of archaism, but in terms of we need to reinstate or
reestablish that. Yeah, it's like, it's like, okay, if I don't know much about fixing a car, right? So it would be like the way music is run now, it'd be like the equivalent of me taking my car to a mechanic that's trained in fixing my car and telling him how to fix my car.
Yeah.
That's, what I'm saying? That's where we are now with music. And it's just like, all it takes is just a slight shift in saying, okay, I don't know anything about this. Let me employ the right people that do. And then that trickles down to everything, every aspect of it, I think gets enhanced. And I don't want to say better or worse. It just, to me, that's a more sustainable, I guess a more sustainable way of looking at it. Better, to me, honestly, the best business model. Like if I had unlimited resources, if I wanted, that's how I would approach it. If I was starting my own label and I had unlimited resources, I would employ the best people that are in every area to ensure that the end product is as good as it can possibly be. And I'm not looking at just, okay, well, little so-and-so over here got 5 million followers. He must be good, because that seems to be the metric now. That's what's defined as what's good, is just by the number of followers. But as we all know with technology, a lot of the times that stuff is faked anyway. So yeah, numbers do lie. I don't care what they say. Numbers do lie.
Absolutely. Hey man, that's great, Kori. So I think this is a good place to stop. Because I said we could go forward, and perhaps if you're open, I say no. In the future, we'll talk again. There's other dimensions of this discussion that we can have on these topics.
Absolutely.
That we can have. But again, I appreciate the fact that you allotted me this time, and also allotted my growing public, given access anyway to you, to your information, your experience. Before we close, so you're still mixing, obviously, and for people who are in this field, obviously, and who are interested, how do they get in touch with you to get just if they need your service? Is there a particular way, or do you want to?
The best way I would say is to get in touch with me. Like I pretty much run everything through my Instagram, which is Mixed by Kori, and that's MIXEDBYKORI. And on there is a link to a booking page and all that. But that's the best way to get in touch with me.
True.
For mixing.
True, and I'll have it obviously in the description section when this episode is published. So we'll have that information there. And any last words, anything that you?
Nah, man. I appreciate you, and it's funny because I'm just excited. I can't wait till you drop your music, because I mean, I like in as a mixer, it's always rewarding when there's that perfect synergy between the artist and myself and working through a project. And every song is just like, you're just excited and just can't wait for the world to hear it. So I'm just, I can't wait for when you drop your music and for everyone to hear it, because it's definitely some amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Thanks. And you, again, like I said, you were highly how you call it, important, for lack of a better term, and helping the production.
Everyone's important in the process.
Yeah. Well, and we'll put it out, man. We just trying to, as you say, the milieu is so challenging for, especially I'm independent, right? So we got to figure out a way not to, as you said, because of the quality and the standard. I feel like I'm not trying to be selfish. It's just that I want to make sure that we have a high.
It land. Yeah, exactly. You landed
that
right.
People get a chance to hear it, that we don't release what we've done, right? So, but I think we did something that's timeless. So we're not gonna wait too long, but we'll figure it out, man. So that's it.
Gotcha.
Man. So that's it, man. So Kori, again, I appreciate it. We'll stay in touch, obviously, and hopefully in the near future we'll have the possibility to have another discussion. And
absolutely,
yeah, man. And everybody, this was Kori Anders, the legendary, you know what I'm saying, Kori Anders, and
thank you.
Look out for him and look out for some of the stuff we've done together. And I wish y'all a good week, and we'll see you next time on another episode of OG's Perspective Podcast. Peace.
Peace.